Mm. Mm. Just at a height that you would feel comfortable giving an FI at. Jane? So what does that mean, a comfortable height? What would you look for that tells you that this is a good height for you? Sorry, Coletta? So what's she showing us? Yeah. What are you checking out here? Yeah, so look, she's checking all of this, what's available, and she's doing a lot of side to side and back. What are some more options you could check in there? This relationship between this and your pelvis, which is what so much of you were finding in that ATM. Huh? So that again, what we're getting with people is this idea, just as we did with Larry, that I can go forward, but forward doesn't have to mean flexion. I can go forward and I could be extended, or I could go forward and I could be extended and side bent, or I could go forward and I can be flexed and rotated and side bent, or I could go back and be flexed a little bit. What are all the different shapes you can make? But you can still feel you've got your center of gravity over your base of support. And this is where we're trying to get to people, that people, a little bit what we did on the disc yesterday, this lesson is incredibly about how many places can I move this in relationship to my base of support and find a way for me to get my arms through. So just beautifully taught. I'm pinching Margaret's, I see I've already forgotten it. Something of the edge of your ability. I'm pinching that. That's now, yeah, absolutely. That's now in my ATM teaching repertoire. That's why it's so good to hear other people teach, yeah, what you can get. So again, what are all of these possible? And you've got the cardinal movements, which, yeah, so you've got this can move forward, back, left, right, turning, and you've also got the axis of flexion, extension, side bending. Huh? So you've got the up, these are the cardinal directions, up, down, forward, back, left, right. And then you've got all the axes within that of flexion, extension, side bending, rotation. So really exploring some of those different places, and how after that lesson you can feel then wherever you go, my arms are light after, yeah. So what are we looking for? And, you know, Sian asked me a really good, beautiful question yesterday. She said, no, it wasn't a question. It was a comment about, oh, you mean I don't have to, what did you say? I don't have to be able to do it all before I can be a practitioner. Huh? I don't have to have all of these possibilities to be able to give someone a good FI lesson. So that's where it's going to keep coming back to, I know where I'm well organised. I know these bits that I know in myself. That's where I'm going to work from. And to continually understand, but there's a lot more options I can open up as well. A lot more possibilities that I can discover in myself. But as long as when you're working, you know you're in your quality, your sense of all of you being involved in the movement. So the ones we've really been hitting this segment are feeling light. Yeah? How do I feel? Get my arms light, my head light. How's that related to this ability to shift my weight over my base of support? And how much, as a practitioner, what difference does it make if I'm just doing it over my pelvis, or if I'm really including my feet, my toes, my heels, my knees, my elbows? So that if I can stay in my quality. It was always really beautiful watching Mark Rees do FI. Mark had had some pretty severe injuries from accidents. And I can always remember him one day saying, you know, I don't lift anything unless it's light. I just don't lift a head or an arm or a leg, because to organise that for me with what I've had is I start to effort, because of the injuries I've had. The FIs he did were brilliant, because he really had to understand having all of himself. And he really understood when Mark's hands were on you, everything was light. And then you'd see someone like Dennis Leary doing FIs. And Dennis, I think Ruth said the other day, Dennis is a black belt kung fu, just a beautiful mover. I mean, just unbelievable. Elizabeth's the same. I don't know what she does in Aikido, but it's way up high. They're both sort of this tall, beautiful moving. And Dennis does the most exquisite small FIs. You'd see him and you'd have no idea. I can remember having a lesson from him, and now I really understand. He got me set up, and he's just going down from my head with this incredible lightness, joining one vertebra to the next. One intervertebral movement. Where does Julie need to go to? There it is. Now where's the next vertebra? So his exquisite ability to feel that finesse within what he was doing. And I can remember 2 days later standing there, and it was just like my functional scoliosis just unwound. And it was just like, what just happened? I can still feel it. I get that feeling, and back it goes again. So his ability, even though he had all these amazing abilities to move through space, then you'd see, Frank, who always did big movements, and Frank, again, powerful FIs, big movements through space was his forte, taking people who weren't used to doing big movements. And Frank was really about orientation. So a lot about, we're going to lead it from your ears. We're going to lead it from your eyes. How are we really going to work with how you orient to the world through these? And of course, they had many other things they did, but that's what we're good at. Do you know what I mean? The things that really interest us, the connections, the relationships that we've made about our function and what we're doing are what we're going to teach better, or what we're going to facilitate better, because we have more understanding in ourselves about it. So you're all going to have your own styles, the ways you bring yourselves. And I think the beauty about seeing more and more FI practitioners is you see that. Do you know what I mean? Everyone has their own way of doing Feldenkrais, but we're all doing Feldenkrais. You can tell it by the quality of our self-use. You can tell it by how we include the whole person in the image of the action. How we use our self-use to bring in information. So if we come back to you sitting now, because again, one of the biggest challenges when we're learning, this is in ATM, is that we get lost in our thing And how powerful is it? And I'm sure, I know you did a lot with this with Jeff, to pause, just to stop, no? To reset again in a way, to come back to how do I create a learning environment for myself? What do I need to do? How have I gone back into my habitual way of learning? How do I stop, reset, come back? And what we pay attention to is, in Feldenkrais practitioners, is this big, rich sensory, not just the sensory world, but the sensory motor world, how we're moving. So what can you pay attention to now in your self-use? So if we go back, what were some of the things you got from the last segment with Jeff that you could pay attention to for your self-use? Using the ground force so that you really felt that you had the ground. Would you add anything to that now from what you've done this segment, the use of the ground? Yeah, so that there can be more maybe weight shift in there. So I'm adding another dimension. I'm adding more information to what I had. What are some other things with Jeff from that segment? Just for you personally, that you've been sort of interested in between the segments of... Yeah. And how do you sense that? Because again, what's your movement telling you that you've got equal distribution of muscle tonus? Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. So there's flow of movement through. Yeah? So there's a flow of movement through. Yeah? So what else does evenness of tone mean to you? Yeah? So something's not standing out in your attention really, is it? When you've got this evenness of tone. You've got a more global attention. Yeah, Alison.
You know, well, for me, fair focus on the pelvis through Jeff's segment now. I feel like I'm bringing more of other parts of my torso, I guess.
So when you said there was a focus on the pelvis, what were you paying attention to? What was it?
I was paying attention to how I was grounded, I suppose, on my sit bones and through to my legs, whereas now I guess I'm kind of, it's like the ink's kind of coming up through my body. Yeah.
So you've added more to that. This is what we're doing with our clients all the time. Do you know what I mean? They're getting approximations and then we're gradually adding more to the idea for them.
For me, it was an ATM that he did. It was this little introduction that there's some connection with here and how the foot, and it's just really stuck with me because it's something I didn't know. So I didn't know in myself.
Yeah. And have you added anything to that?
Well, it allows me to, it comes back to the feeling of the ground, and you know, and I can feel that there's something that I need to pay attention to there because it's not habitual, it's not known to me, and that really helps me to still know. So it's got something to do with the ground and the feet, the way I stand, and the way that I can distribute my weight.
So that's what we're doing, you know. So what we could say to Sue is, can you feel when you've got that, Sue? Yeah? How would I build this up? Someone, can you feel when you've got that, Sue? What directions can you move in easily with your pelvis in terms of forwards and backwards? Yeah, do it. No, just do it. So you're just going to keep that in your awareness, that feeling. Now, how does that help with what directions you can move in on your pelvis? Yeah? And what difference does it make in your shoulders? In the lightness of your arms? Yeah? Yeah? And not. Yeah? Bring it back again. So this is what we're doing. People will get one bit of the picture. But as practitioners, and I want it with my clients, I want them to keep building it up, to build those parts of their self-image they're clarifying into how this influences how I act in the world. What possibilities does this open up for me? Not just that I've found that, but how am I putting it all together? And this is your process through the training. Keep adding more layers, looking for more relationships. So what else? Maybe there's something new you've got.
Mine was one of the ATMs we did, which was finding the space between movements. That has actually been so valuable. And I forget to do it a lot. But
doing a movement.
Then finding that space. And in that space, there's a whole wealth of information. There we go.
Yeah.
And it gives you more options. You've just got that moment. I don't have to repeat the same movement.
Yeah.
I can do it different.
I've actually got a space that I can reset again.
Yes.
Yeah. And come to it with a new freshness and curiosity. Or often just to really give people the time to, and this is the same in ATM, you know, notice when Margaret went, and sometimes we give people a lot of time to rest. But because often we think, oh, we're going to feel the change straight away. But if you actually give yourself time to lie there, you give your system time to go, oh, that's touching the floor now. What could give up a little bit more? So that it doesn't just have to be cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect, but that we learn to give ourselves time, if you like, to reflect. That intention into action, that's the pause we've got, which is a big one up on the organising themes. Or how do I know when I'm more integrated? Yeah.
So for me it was getting a sense of the inside, this sort of cylinder effect through the inside. And that came in a few unexpected ways. Right towards the end he did that same ATM with a little, and that's when I first felt it throughout the whole body. But a lot of the things that he was doing through the ground gave me this inside of the legs. Like my body image, I realised, was sort of the outside image. So, you know, getting on the inside was, and I've noticed that in subsequent ATMs that I've been to or that I've, you know, been involved with different things, and it's been a continuous theme since then.
Fantastic. So what does that do? Go a little bit to the outside. You're still organised, can you feel? What's happened to your attention there?
Yeah.
It's not good or bad, but can you feel it's a little bit more diffuse, a little bit more peripheral?
It's more out into the world, sort of.
Yeah, you've got space
been,
around you, and you're sort of, now bring that in. What does that do to your attention?
It really does bring it in.
It focuses. It doesn't mean you've got to lose all that, but it's a different orientation. As I think don't know who I was saying to it. It's that difference between, as I said, what I was really noticing, because we've been doing so much across the ground, which is about letting your head go. Do you know what I mean? It's giving up to gravity in a way. And what I noticed is that in the second part of the afternoon, you were all really just getting a bit too much there. It was like, let's get a little bit more, boom, back in. And you could feel the difference, that thinking about the top of your head, which is very midline, knowing where's the top of my head in space. What does that, how most of you came up to standing, going forward, not rolling. Huh? So how do all these, none of them are good or bad, they're just different ways. They're really useful in many different ways. But how do we begin to understand how we organise all of these different things in ourselves? Huh? So that if I want to, so now that you're sitting again, what about breathing? What you did? I'm sure you did a lot with breathing with Jeff. Is the more you can add to your breathing now, because he's done a lot down here, is there some other parts that are there as well now too in your breath that you can sort of again build up this picture for yourself that it's not just here. This is incredibly important because we know then we've got the ground and the, but what does this space up here help us to do with getting light arms? And our head a little bit freer when we've got more possibilities of where we can breathe into our front and our back and our left and our right and our top and our bottom. So now, what about if you think of the top of your head? What does that do to your self-use? Do you know whether, and is it something about by letting you get all this mobility about across the ground, letting your head go, maybe out of it, some of its habitual configurations, that you could get a sense that my head, I've got a clearer sense of where my head is in space. That I've got a top of my head and a back of my head and a front of my head and two sides. And maybe for you that's not that clear yet. So the head's something that Feldenkrais maps out in incredible detail in a lot of ATMs. He uses painting and distances and lines and circling it and all sorts of things, because this ability to move our head that you found at the end of that lesson, you know, Mark said, what's happening right up the top now? Is what's happened through you that this top of your head, because again, it's the vestibular system in our ears that's telling us where we are in space. Huge thing. Huh? So what's the difference if someone can start to walk and their head's in their image just as much as their hands are in their image or their feet are in their image? So what are all these things? I don't know, maybe you do an ATM and you just at home and you get up and think, how would this help with my self-use in FI? What's been added to this picture of what I can be aware of in myself, or have I added some new dimensions to it? And there, as I said, they're going to be things that interest you, things that you're interested in. So now, could one of you get someone lying on the table and someone at the head? So one of you is going to lie on a table and you're going to find a partner who's at the head of the table. One more. Mm. Mm. And it doesn't really matter what position they're in on the table. They don't have to be on their back. They can be anywhere. Mm. 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 Yeah, everyone's got someone on the table. So again, focus a little bit more foreground in your attention on yourself as the practitioner first. So just sitting, not doing anything, not touching, find yourself first. What are the questions you could ask yourself that tell you your self-use is where you'd like it to be, that your attention can move? What are the questions? So it might be about you, but you're not doing anything, Ramona. This is all about you at the moment. All about you. You're first and foremost in your attention. Huh? So is it something about how many options you've got about moving across the ground? Is it going to be easy for you to move forward in space? Huh? Can you get a sense? You can ask your own, of your breathing being available in more parts of yourself. But most importantly, I'm going to suggest is this lightness in your arms. With all of what we've been adding over the last few days, are my arms light? Are my arms light? So then, you've got someone in front of you on the table. And the question you're going to ask, don't ask it yet, because I want to see what you're going to come up with. The thing we're going to do is rolling the person's head. What are you going to be interested in how they roll their head? How many distinctions can you make? Might be the quality. What are some of the other things you might be looking for? So it might be the quality. What other things? The trajectory. Where does their head want to go? Does it go straight across? Does it go a little bit up, a little bit down? What other things might you be interested in? What else comes along for the ride? Yeah. So as I'm taking their head, do I feel that everything's going to follow me, or maybe there could be a counterbalance, or how far through them, where it stops? Yeah. Where's the bit that it stops? What else? What's happening with their breathing as I roll their head? So obviously, Helen, if she's going to do that, she's going to be doing a slower movement, isn't she? To have time to answer that question. What other things? Because all these things telling us about their organisation, this rolling of the head gives us so much information about someone. Yeah, same. Yeah, how far through can we fence it? How do their eyes? What do their eyes do when I roll their head? Do their eyes stay soft in the sockets? Do they start getting a little fluttery? Because there's many ways. I could roll my head and my eyes just stay in the middle. And again, it's going to depend on the speed I do it. Do the eyes go with it? Does it feel like their eyes lead the movement? So, what's your question when you roll their head? And when I say this, I'm not saying that sometimes you'll just go in and the questions will start to emerge. But what I'm suggesting is you've got a reason for rolling their head. You're gathering information. Huh? Even though you mightn't have brought it to this level, you're gathering information. So, get back to your self-use. Yeah. And find, is there a difference in your organisation if you've got a specific question? that you're going to ask? Or is it different if you just go, I'm rolling their head? Does something change internally in your organisation if you're going in and saying, I'm going to roll their head, compared to if you have a specific query? Off you go. That's what you're exploring. And simply notice if you're someone who really likes just to keep it really open, or if it's easier for you if you have a specific question about, because here we're gathering information. So if we go to Helen's question, let's all try that. I'm going to see, does their breathing get influenced by the rolling of their head? How would that change what you're doing if that's your question? Do you organise yourself differently if that's your question? Are you aware of different things in yourself? And you're just noticing, is that a question I'd ask or not? Okay, so your next ones, a lot of you said how much of the person's involved. So now if you started rolling their head, one of the interesting things could be, where do they initiate this action from? I'm rolling their head, and what's the first part of them that starts to move? Is it up really high in their neck? Is it down lower? So where do they initiate the action from? And again, remember we were talking back earlier about how you could roll across the ground or do more a light roll? Does that change where they initiate the action from? If you're thinking of giving them ground as you roll their head, do they make a different trajectory if you're rolling them across the ground compared to letting them just simply lightly move across the ground? So what changes in your self-use, and keep coming back, just as Helen said, keep resetting, and your next query is, what do their eyes do when I roll their head? What do their eyes do? If I imagine that they were looking somewhere, could their eyes, could I get a sense of how their eyes could lead this movement? And again, what I'm interested in here is not you changing anything in them or doing anything, but simply saying what happens in your self-use. What happens, again, in terms of orientation, if we think that you thought of their ears leading the movement, that you were asking, could your ears lead the movement? You're still rolling their head from their forehead, still rolling it from the forehead. So as you look at these different relationships, is there something about having more questions? And then again, it's like ATM, can I add more? You know, I'm noticing that if I roll from their eyes, and how does that go through them? And pause, just let it be. So this is the same as in ATM. It's the same at the end of a lesson. You know, it's the same. What I'm saying to you is I'm just going to roll someone's head and see what emerges. Someone gets up at the end of a lesson. You're just letting something emerge. Does it make sense? How much of them is there? How then do I need to go in and find more relationships for them? Okay. Come up to, because you've both really felt it, even if you haven't done it. You've felt, could you feel the difference in intention? The people lying? Huh? And just get into groups of 4 and just say, what was interesting about that? So just get into groups of 4. What was interesting? To just talk about what was interesting about doing that. Because you're working out what are the questions that are meaningful to this client or not, just as in ATM. Here to roll their head again. Do I include what I've just done in the image? And this is your ATM practice as well. Do you know what I mean? Is each new step a new thing? You know? Oh, okay, ready to go again. Or is the, what have I just done? What is it that I've just got from that previous thing? What is it that I found when I was resting, that parts of me were further on the ground, or my breathing is easier, that I'm going to take with me to the next step? And is that something you do or not? Because that's what you'll do in FI as well. Hmm? You know, do you constantly go, oh, yeah, I've just done this with their feet. Yeah, I've got Karen. Yes, we've been doing all this with the feet, and I'm all thinking through what that's done with her head and how does she shift her weight. And then I come up here and I forget all about her feet. What's that got to? And I roll ahead. Or am I thinking, Karen, can I sense any relationship to what we just did with your feet and your hips and your legs? Can you feel that difference, Helen? Helen. I'm not just rolling Karen's head. I'm connecting it to what the lesson's been about. So this idea of open questions, more closed questions, you know, if I get too closed, does it close the person's, you know? So if I ask a really specific question, do I lose the rest of them in the image? Yeah, these are the things you're really playing with in terms of your self-use, and how am I organized to be more open or more oriented to what I'm asking someone to do. Okay, let's have a break. We'll have a break, just a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back and watch another bit of Larry.